Welcome. Oh, give me 1 second. Welcome, educators. This is day one of the mini series Workload Tips for Educators. My apology for the pause in my start. There is a lag between when I present through Zoom as well as getting on Facebook. So just bear with me. There's nothing I can do about that little lag. Thank you so much for joining me on day one. If you are here with me, please say hi in the chat. I try and watch the chat as much as possible and respond while I'm presenting. Say hi. If you're catching the replay, definitely put in there that you're catching the replay. As always, if this is your first time with me, we are going to meet this mini-series for 3 evenings, tonight, Wednesday night, and Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time. I try and deliver these messages or these lessons in 20 minutes or less. So I try and give you lots of good information and then let you go. I know that you're all busy. You've had long, busy days, as well as your evenings are pretty busy with family or other things that you have to do, and potentially even working. I have been watching and communicating with a lot of educators, and I cannot believe the time that we're all spending on learning what to do now that COVID is here and all the different forms of instruction that we have to provide nowadays. The demands are higher than ever, and I want you to know I recognize that. The stress levels are higher than ever. The burnout rate among educators is higher than ever. If you're at this point where you're just high stress levels, and we've talked about that in past mini-series, don't worry. I want you to just keep moving forward, and hopefully today's workload tips between today and through Thursday, you're going to get some strategies that will help you improve and manage the workload demands that are happening right now. In education, 22 years ago when I started my first year of teaching, it became evident I was not prepared. I was ill prepared to manage the workload and the demands that it takes on an educator, even back then. And now today it's even more so. So I'm super excited to provide you some simple strategies, evidence-based strategies, highly effective. CEOs of top companies are using these strategies, and I can tell you that they worked very well for me in the classroom. Whether you're a paraprofessional, teacher, classroom teacher, or a principal, please stay with me. These strategies work for everyone. Now, I did not get a chance to differentiate based on the learning model that you're in. So I know that everyone's in different models, and it's kind of a fluid transition that we have to go through right now, right? Depending on our COVID numbers. Some of us are full distance, some of us are face-to-face, and some of us are hybrid. So feel free to comment where you're at as well. If your district is in one model or the other, I want to hear about that. I also want you to say hi, so let me know that you're here watching. You can like it just so that I know. And any questions or comments, feel free to post them in the chat, and I'll try and address them throughout my presentation. But if I can't or I don't, I always get back as much as possible. And at any time, you can direct message me. So I did post some handouts for today's lesson for you to take a look at. If you take a look, there's a PDF that one says reflect and prioritize. So on this 3-day mini series, for day one, we are going to start with just reflecting, and I'm going to help you prioritize what needs to be done and just really sort through what doesn't need to be done. And yes, there are probably things on your list that don't need to be done, and hopefully we can help set that aside. Right now, with the learning curve as big as it is, having to shift due to the COVID restrictions, policies and procedures, and everything happening, I want you to know that it is a time to get minimal. So I want you to think about becoming a minimalist. I want to say I started learning workload tips 20 years ago. One, because I couldn't keep up and I felt like I was drowning. Trying to manage all the data that we have to track and all the correcting and communicating, collaborating, facilitating among parents, the community, our colleagues. It was so much. It was so overwhelming. It was nothing that I was ever prepared for. And then the other part is I actually went and wanted to learn more about workload strategies because I was lazy. So I know most of us have heard the phrase work smarter, not harder. And it's really called intelligent laziness, is really learning these workload tips. And also, if I can preserve myself throughout the day, then I certainly can be more present with my students and be better for my family once I get home. So hopefully these workload tips will help you with some of the external factors that are coming your way, the external stressors that are really adding and putting things on your plate. Now we always have the internal, which is stress management. And if you look back at past mini series that I provided, you'll get some tips there. So if you are new to this group, welcome. All right, let's go ahead and get started. For tonight, I want you to be open when you're with me. So be open to learn new strategies. Be open to try new things. Be open to reflect and maybe try a strategy again that didn't work in the past. I want you to be here with me. So feel free to turn off any notifications that you have. Try to avoid multitasking. As I've shared in the past, our brain really isn't very effective or efficient when we're trying to multitask. And then be present. So if you find yourself wandering off, like you're not you, but if your mind wanders off during this presentation, bring yourself back just by anchoring. You might choose a word that I just recently said. You might say it to yourself. That'll anchor you to this conversation right here, right now. That'll keep you from thinking about all of the things that maybe happened in the day or anticipating what's coming next. Or if you're feeling anxious about anything at work, that's a great way to be present, is through anchoring. All right, so hopefully you may have had time to grab this reflection sheet. If not, I'm going to walk you through that. So what we want to do is we want to really take a look at what are we doing in a day? And we want to get very clear on that. The very first part is to gather some baseline data. And so what we want to talk about or think about, and I did include a PDF if you want to write it down, is I want you to reflect all the tasks that you typically do in a day. And this is like, think about all of them. So if it's check email, you grade 100% of your papers, you email, and try and think of like email 10 parents in a day. Do you email 20 parents in a day? Do you make 5 phone calls? The clearer that you can be on the data of what you're actually doing in a day, actually the more accurate and the more helpful that this assignment or this little worksheet will be for you. And trust me on this, I've done throughout my years, I've done plenty of time studies on my own workload day just to see how I can become more effective and efficient. And this really, really helps. So just write down everything you do in the day. Do you run to the office 5 times? If you are in the building, right? Or are you bouncing between maybe computers? I've seen some people's distance learning workstations and they have 3 different laptops set up. So if you're doing that on a regular basis and you're opening up this screen and closing this screen, or if you only have one and you're constantly bouncing back and forth, that's something you want to write down. And the reason why, if you remember, if you've been part of my past mini-series, is that we actually lose effectiveness when we are constantly bouncing back and forth between tasks. And I'll talk about in days 2 and 3, we're going to talk about how to bundle your tasks and be more efficient at them. So, but I want you to really think like that much in detail. Let's see, other things, reminders. Are you giving lots of reminders in a day? Do you feel like a broken record? Do you feel like you're constantly telling your students, your folders go in this bin, or you need to hit mute, right? For those of you that are distance learning, I want you to think of those reminders or the broken record pieces that are stressing you out and that you're providing every single day, all day long throughout the day. Write that down on this sheet. The other thing I want you to think about is how much do you socialize? Socialization is good. We are hardwired for connection. We need to be connecting with one another. So I'm not going to say that that shouldn't be on there, but let's get accurate. Are you socializing for an hour? Are you collaborating? Sometimes we collaborate, which turns into socialization. Sometimes I totally get carried away and can easily have a 15-20 minute conversation with a colleague. Definitely connecting, healthy conversation, not necessarily work focused, much needed conversation, but then I needed 20 minutes to make my copies and I didn't get that done. So those are the things that you want to write down. On the second column, what I want you to do is I want you to write down, what do you need to do in a day? Now, when I say need to do, I want you to think minimal job requirements, to do the bare minimum. Now, I know as a teacher, educator, you are not doing bare minimum. Educators do not show up bare minimum. That's not how you roll. Very few of you do that. Most of you go above and beyond, like above and beyond. So this is the reason why we look at what I need to do in a day is because we want to compare the two columns, and we want to look to see, is there imbalance? Are we doing far more than what we minimally need to do in a day? Now, if we start recognizing what we minimally need to do in a day, and by all means, again, I'm not saying don't do your workload or anything like that, but what can happen is on a day that we're really, really stressed, if we can meet the bare minimum on those days, we will have more energy to carry us through the day. It will also help us, we kind of save energy here so that we can put in energy for the days that we want to go above and beyond, or we need to work extra hours or later that day. We can also look at some tasks. There are some tasks that we can get away with bare minimum, like collecting data with just a tally. That is a super simple way to do bare minimum versus doing anecdotal data. I've had teachers talk about, boy, collecting anecdotal data for a student behavior or for other reasons, that's very time consuming, and I agree, it is. But what we can do is we can look at the trends of that anecdotal data. A lot of times we know the trends of the misbehavior that we're kind of trying to keep track of, right? We only need a little bit of the anecdotal stuff, and then the rest we can just quickly tally. That would be like a minimal strategy that I'm talking about. So I'm not talking about cutting corners. I am talking about, let's just look to see what we can do as the minimum. Then on the third column, what we want to do is we want to assess how much time are we actually spending on, or how are we actually spending our time, sorry. And what we want to do is we want to be very honest here. So what I will get caught up in is the rabbit hole in my email. I will start opening irrelevant emails because the tagline, the subject line was so interesting and it looked like a new strategy that I could use. Or the other things that I will do is I will rewrite the same thing several times in a day. So in my profession, I did a lot of special education. Those are standardized assessments and checklists that I would have to send out to teachers. And I would often write due date, and write the due date. Or I would write repeatedly, return to Shiloh Webb over and over and over. And so by doing like a sample like this, a reflection sheet, what I learned was I can just do little address labels that say return to Shiloh Webb, and all I would do is stick it out or peel one off, stick it on the sheet, and I didn't have to rewrite it. That saved me a lot of time. I would say probably 10-15 minutes in a day sometimes with the amount of paperwork that comes with special education. So again, I see that people are coming. If you're joining me, please say hi, let me know that you're here. So that's why we want to look at how are we actually spending our time in a day. The other thing that I do is I get lost in social media, and I think that's pretty common for us. So if you get lost in social media and somehow you can lose track of time, whether it's when you get home from work or whether you took 5 minutes of your lunch break to check social media and you used up your entire 30 minutes, I want you to put that down. This is a time to get honest with yourself. And then the other thing is spend too much time researching on new ideas, or student behaviors would come up, the emergencies that would come up. That it should also be here. So you want to put things that you are actually doing, and also the things that are completely out of your control, but are eating up your time. Okay, technology issues. Right now, that's a major one, eating up a lot of our time. Get that down on that list. Okay. So then what we want to do is we want to go through the questions that I have below. Take a look to see if there's an imbalance. Are there things on this column that you can eliminate, that you really don't need to do in a day? Or if you're spending about 15 minutes doing, can you cut it down to 5 minutes? For instance, I do training on team meetings. And I train out how to take an hour meeting and cut it down to 25, 30 minutes. The average IEP meeting should not be longer than 25, 30 minutes. Yes, I said that. And yes, it's possible. So if you want to know how, feel free to contact me. We'll talk about that another time. But those are ways that we can save time. And so we want to be honest, how much time are we spending, so that we can look to see how much time we can cut out. If there's an imbalance, right now with the learning curve that's happening and all the extra demands due to COVID, we need to go minimum. We start with minimum. We become skilled and proficient at minimum before we add more to our plate. Okay, again, we go minimum. We become skilled and proficient at handling the minimum before we add the extras to our plate. So that's what this exercise is meant to do and for you to look at. All right, so then I want you to also think, as you go through this list and look at what do I really need to keep doing, what don't I need to keep doing, think about, is there anything that I can improve, remove, or delegate? Now, I know not all of you have an assistant that you can pass tasks on to, but are there ways that you could have a student helper? Can you delegate some tasks that way? Or is that something that you can collaborate with your team and start sharing tasks? Maybe, so for instance, I often traded with a teacher that was really good at spreadsheets. He took care of the spreadsheets. I took care of student behavior. I love student behavior. It fills my bucket. Spreadsheets and data fills my bucket, but spreadsheet organization and creation of really complex or more complex one fills his bucket. So that's what we did. All right. So then the next thing, once you get that done, I want you to think about the tasks that you need to get done in a day. All right. And I want you to prioritize. So when we look at this, we have importance on this side and we have urgent here. Okay. This is high importance, high urgency. Any of those tasks in a day that are high importance, high urgent, need to be on the top of your to-do list. Every day I start out my day with a big 3. My big 3 are these things. Okay? If they're not big 3, if I don't have 3 things there, then I start filling it in. But the last things that ever get done are really the ones that are low importance and low urgent. Okay, so you have to decide what is more important or urgent. Urgent is usually the tasks that people are waiting for me on, and so I will do those tasks before I go to importance. But you know what I'm saying, like if it falls here, you know to do that first, and then these other quadrants you can decide what you have to decide what is most important for you. So that's what I want you to focus on today. If you take the time to fill out your worksheet, and if you actually send me a picture in the messenger of Facebook, Shiloh Webb, I will actually enter your name in a drawing for a $5 Caribou coffee card. So anyone that participates in tonight's activity, please send me a picture, let me know that you did it, and you will be entered in a drawing for a $5 Caribou coffee card. All right, so for tonight's activity, that's what your homework is. Go ahead and go through this list, figure out what you're doing in a day, what is the minimum, right? And then how you're actually spending your time. Don't take too much time reflecting on it. This can actually be a really quick activity right now. It's just to get your brain going and thinking and prepped for nights 2 and 3. All right. Any questions that you have at all, or if you want information about the work that I do with stress management, we work on workload, fatigue, achievement results, and team dynamics, I want you to visit my website, Inner Matter. So go to https://innermatter.net. Okay, just look up innermatter.net. If you want to speak with me directly, feel free to fill out a contact form and I will get in touch with you, or my assistant will get in touch with you as soon as possible. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, if you watched, please let me know that you're watching. Say hi. Let me know that you're watching the replay. And then I look forward to seeing some of these worksheets done and to see where you're at. All right, I hope you have a good evening all, and we'll see you tomorrow. Good night.